Hello, my name's Helen Tovey. I'm editor of Family Tree. Today I'm going to talk to Lesley Trotter about her talk at the forthcoming Secret Lives conference. And Lesley's going to talk about the wives left behind with 19th century emigration, particularly for Cornwall.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Yeah. And so how did you first get interested in this subject?
It was when I started spotting entries in the census, where in the woman's occupation column for married women, it would say husband in Brazil, or husband in Chile, or America, or California, and all these amazing places. And I'm used to sort of family members, and from my own personal experience, people who've got husbands abroad in the military, or engineers who've worked abroad or working on the oil fields. But they're modern day. Their husbands, you can phone them up. You're in regular contact. So what on earth was it like for these women in the 1850s to have their husbands in remote parts of Chile or Bolivia or places like that?
And so has your research covered that? Has it found out what it's like to be the women and children staying in Cornwall? Like how did they get funded? Like did they have to work to earn their own money? Did money get sent back? What happened?
A huge variation in stories. A lot of the women got remittances from their husbands working abroad. And some of the husbands had gone out on contracts where the employers would pay the women directly with home pay in Cornwall.
That sounds quite good.
Well, that was great for the women because that gave them a really reliable income.
Yeah.
A lot of the other men had gone out more or less on spec, possibly to gold rushes and things like that. And the kind of money that the women were getting back was not so regular. It was very intermittent. And they'd be sending things like banker's drafts, or even some men sent gold nuggets home to their wives.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, isn't it?
But it was a very irregular income, so the women could always had that uncertainty.
And so what sort of communities, if it's Cornwall, was it mainly the mining industry which led to these, I guess it's economic migration, isn't it? What would you call it?
Yes, it's economic, but there's an incredible international labour market in the mining industry very early on, because we have miners being recruited to go and work in Cuba in the 1820s and 30s, which is remarkably early to send somebody halfway across the world for a 3-year contract.
Was it mainly then for short-term contracts, or have you found evidence of people staying out, permanently emigrating?
Certainly some of them did. A lot of people went with the intention that they were going to stay. Some people went with the intention they were not going to stay, and then everybody changed their minds, circumstances changed. Perhaps sometimes parents in Cornwall died, so there wasn't that pull to bring them back, that sort of thing. But it was a complete... There's no one story. You can't make any generalisation about why people went, how long they went for, or anything like that. It's so different.
So did the wives ever go out as well? Do you find evidence of the children being born abroad?
Yes, surprisingly so. In my research, I followed hundreds of women from one census to the next to try and find out what happened to them. And about, 10 to 20% in cases that the husband had come back and they were reunited in Cornwall. A smaller amount, we could find them in America. Particularly, it was much easier to find them in America because of the American censuses. It was much harder to trace them if they'd gone to Australia or places like that. But of course, you've got that 10-year gap between censuses, and the Cornish were so mobile that they could have been anywhere in between.
Yeah.
So you might have a couple in a village in Cornwall in 1851, and they're there in 1861, and you might think, oh, they haven't, that's where they've been. And then you look at the children and think, they've got a child who's been born in Brazil. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Something clearly has been going on here.
Yeah.
So it really does show you just what a snapshot the census is. You really can't trust it, but people stayed, in the same place between those years.
Yeah. And so what would you recommend then for somebody who's looking to research, say, presumably there's other communities as well, but Cornish ancestors, to make sure that you do, what other records would you use? Would it be passenger lists, or what are you using to fill in those gaps between the census years?
Certainly, passenger lists can be useful, although it can be very difficult to identify accurately the people. There's a lot of duplication of names in Cornwall. My heart used to sink when I found somebody called Elizabeth Bennett, for example. You just couldn't tell which one was which. So unless you've got a woman who's travelling with easily identifiable combination of children in the passenger lists, it can be quite hard to work out who's who. I would say if you are researching anybody with a Cornish mining background, and that doesn't just include miners, it includes people like carpenters, masons, engineers, anybody who might be involved in that mining industry. Bear in mind, there's a very, very strong possibility that at some point the menfolk worked abroad. But there are international Cornish associations who've done a lot of research and have followed stories through. So a lot of what we know comes from an accumulation of personal research on different families. And it's very often these women who are left behind are the sort of the quiet folklore heroines in these family stories. But they suddenly say, when you talk to these people with family histories in Cornwall, oh yeah, my grandfather went to South Africa, but my grandmother didn't go.
Yeah.
And they suddenly think, oh no, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks so much about the people who went, they don't really think about what it was like for the women or the rest of the families who stayed behind.
And do you think it made for the communities to be much stronger, because presumably the families which are left behind are going to have to support each other? So probably you imagine that communities like that do have closer bonds, and sea folk, you tend to think they have closer bonds because it's lives which are quite perilous in lots of respects, aren't they?
I think the mining communities did anyway, because mining is so dangerous.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you've got that extra layer of danger.
Yeah.
Because emigration from Cornwall started so early and went all the way through, we start with emigration to Latin America in the 1820s, and then we get to America, Australia, and towards the end of the century it's South Africa, and just about everywhere in between, Russia, Turkey, Norway, Newfoundland, all over the place. We've got multiple generations of wives who were left behind. So a young wife could call on the experience of her aunts and her mother and other women in the community as simple things like, what do I do with the banker's draft when it comes in the post? How do I turn that into something I can
spend,
buy food with, and things
yeah.
like that?
Yeah. Oh, it does sound very interesting as well. So you're seeing small individual families, but then put in that wider context of like the massive Victorian like trade industries. You say international commerce. Yeah, it's a little kind of micro story in there, isn't it? Each of those things. Yeah.
But it wasn't just Cornwall. It's amazing how much of an international labour market there was. I didn't realise that before I started researching, but I started coming across references to builders and decorators going over for the building season in New York regularly. Yeah. Quarrymen going over to the American quarries because they could enhance their careers by working over there, learning new skills and then coming back. Seasonal workers, it's quite amazing how travelled people were.
And brave and kind of plucky to go off. As you say, earlier on you said that they couldn't readily communicate with each other as you could do nowadays. So go off, hope for the best, and your family won't hear from you for definitely weeks, maybe months and months.
Usually about 3 months or so. If they went to Australia, your first letter would probably be about 3 months' time, if you were lucky. But so much post went astray that it was very unreliable. But the other useful thing about the Cornish communities, because when people did go abroad, the chances are they went abroad with neighbours, friends, with other people from Cornwall. So whenever they arrived, there was probably somebody they already knew there or knew somebody they knew.
Yeah.
So information was filtering back to the families in Cornwall via everybody else's letters.
Yes.
So you might not hear from your husband, but your neighbour might have heard from her husband, who mentions that she's seen your husband somewhere else.
You know he's okay.
So, you think, oh, right, okay, everything's fine.
Yeah. That sounds great. Thank you. And can I just ask one last question? What are you particularly looking forward to from the Secret Lives Conference?
I think it's fascinating, the range that you've got coming out of it, the number of stories and things like that, because obviously I've specialised in this particular subject, and I should be fascinated to see the other areas.
So you're looking forward to listening to some of the other talks?
Absolutely. Yeah. But also, I mean, I'd love to see what the reaction is, because I'd love to hear other people's ideas about my subject, because it may well be, as I say, other people have come across references in other parts of the country. I've concentrated on Cornwall, but the more I read, the more I'm convinced that this was happening in other places, but we just haven't looked at it to find it. So it'd be really interesting to get the feedback on that as well.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you then, Lesley. Thank you very much.